Still with me in studio to discuss the concept of revolutionising talent management through customization are Luan Libbe, Talent and Organisational Performance Lead at Accenture South Africa, Garen Markcroft, Senior Manager at Accenture UK, and Conrad Steyn, Director of Business Application and Information Services at Barnstone. Luan, before you went to break, we were talking about where the starting point is for an organisation watching this show tonight and wanting to create a workforce of one. Your view on that?
What we found through some of the organizations that we've worked with and that we now view as the pioneers of Workforce of One is that many of them realized that in fact the employee value proposition that they were offering the employees were not meeting their needs, were not meeting their expectations. We then engaged with them in a number of instances. We conduct extensive research, statistical data, and also through interviews, and we found that in those organizations, and this would be the likes of Microsoft, Procter & Gamble, Best Buy, Men's Warehouse, etc., where 94% of the employees felt that the employee value proposition and the HR offering were not motivating them, were not actually providing the right level of engagement that those offerings were seeking to deliver to the organization. And out of that realization came, well, the reason for it is that we're treating the workforce as a workforce of multiples, but we're treating everybody the same. And we're not actually responding to the individual needs and the individual ways of working and the individual ways of requirements for compensation, etc. And I think a lot of that has been driven by technological advancement, where if you think about a few years ago when you got your first cell phone, you had an option of 5 ringtones. You can now personalize that to the nth degree. You can personalize anything just about. Science you can personalize. So if you think of what that offers, employees now know that they can personalize anything out there, but why can the organization not personalize my value proposition to me? And I think that's where employers realize that we have the technology that's available to be able to do that. We have a workforce, Generation X, Y, that demands this. And through that, then started moving towards creating a workforce of one, creating, segmenting your workforces and offering them different choices.
Conrad, do you think this personalisation could lead to better staff retention within an organisation?
Yeah, I think in general it could lead, if you look at the knowledge workers and so I definitely think that in that area it will lead to better staff retention. But I think there's also an element of when you become an employee, there's a reason why you go to that company and why you don't do everything on your own. It's part of you associate. An organization is an association of people, so you're associating with them, and you also have to fit in with this association. So if your expectation can't be that you are just purely an individual and that you want everything in your way and the way you want it for yourself. You've got to also fit in with what the objectives are for the organization. So I think, yes, it can actually, for certain individuals, be better for retention. But I think for other people, if you don't manage this well, it could actually also be off-putting. If I have to spend a lot of time about thinking about all these options that's in front of me, some people want structure and they want to be guided in a certain direction. So I think you've got to manage that quite well for the different kinds of people in the organisation.
And Garen, just looking at the learning function, perhaps you join an organisation, it makes a specific sort of widget. You have to learn how to make that widget. How many ways can you learn how to make that widget? Surely everybody has to learn the same way.
Not necessarily. I mean, people learn visually, so you might be looking at very kind of hands-on, and some people learn by being shown what to do and then practicing it.
And you do give them that choice then?
I think you have to give these choices. I think even in kind of making widgets, some people can just watch and then or read a manual and do it. Others are actually far more kind of trial and get coached and hands-on experience. So people learn in different ways. Expecting the same result from a kind of read this manual perspective or a kind of classroom training, to expect 100 people to produce exactly the same product to the end of that training is not effective. It doesn't happen that way. People learn in different ways. So it's really important that employees have the ability to learn in different ways, especially kind of in the knowledge worker sector. It's less so in manufacturing, but it's still important that you provide people the best way that they can learn.
This sounds more onerous for the organisation itself if you have to find a number of ways to teach the person the same thing.
It's not more onerous. It's just about designing things in a slightly more different way, giving different options in terms of developing courses in slightly different ways. So you have activity-based learning rather than just developing 20 slides and getting someone to read what's on the slide. That's not effective, but giving a little bit more thought into it can actually create a number of different ways you can show some of the problem. It's like being a teacher and someone not understanding a problem. You have to think through 4 or 5 different ways to explain to that child what the principle of what you're teaching is. So it's about thinking that through in the design rather than just while you're standing up lecturing at someone.
Well, and you mentioned a number of companies that had successfully implemented a workforce of one strategy in the corporation. How does it differentiate them from others? Do they perform better because they have this workforce of one?
Our research fortunately shows that of course it does. If you look at just employee retention, and again we spoke about the war for talent a little earlier, retention in some organizations, the Bank of Banesta for example in Spain, their retention improved significantly, their attrition reduced by 50%, Procter & Gamble productivity increased significantly. This actually every single organization that has adopted a workforce of one and that has practices to support it, without exception we can say that company performance has improved, financial performance, bottom line results, employee engagement has increased, employee retention has absolutely improved, and all of those at the end of the day anyway would contribute to better business results. So those organizations, those pioneers that have adopted this and have gone down this road, without any doubt, bottom line results have been shown.
Conrad, would you go along with that? Do you think that this is going to result in a differentiated organisation? Also look at the cost aspect perhaps, because we're talking about HR systems and learning systems speaking to one another, being integrated, and it does sound like there is a cost implementation there.
Yeah, I think there'd certainly be a cost implication, but I think you've got to balance that, or you've got to look at the balance between what the cost is in investing in this and versus the cost of not investing in it. I think getting the right people together is really what makes a business successful or not. So if you want to keep those people and you want to make sure you attract the right people, you've got to invest in the talent. Now there are different ways to invest in that talent, and if this has shown to be more successful than others, then certainly it would be a good option to look at. But I don't think you can be unrealistic and say there's not going to be a cost in this. The foundation that's required for making this work, a lot of companies still have to actually get to that baseline. You were talking earlier about HR systems and talent management, and all of those sort of standardized, integrated systems will be required before you can actually start differentiating. Otherwise, you're just back in a situation where you're making a deal with each individual.
Yeah.
Well, how about the war for talent, Garen? Do you think that in the war for talent, and we know that there is a battle to get the best talent within your organisation, do you think this gives your organisation the upper hand if you do have a workforce of one?
Absolutely, I think it's more. It's certainly the war for talent in kind of the BRIC countries in China and Russia, particularly where I've been kind of working with a number of sales teams. You get some good people in, they don't get career progression in 2 years. They see no kind of progression, so they just move on to another company. You've lost that key person. Companies are really trying to tailor what they get in terms of the training, the career progression, potentially getting some external accreditation through some kind of mini kind of university type with Harvard business type series. So there's anything to help them develop their growth and get them to stay with the company and differentiate them as an employer versus other employers in the market. So it's really important that companies understand that employees can move. The market in the BRIC countries is extremely hot, and your success is dependent on retaining your top talent, and that involves investment and making sure they feel that they're getting something out of the bargain.
I'm sure this customization has to permeate the entire organisation for it to be successful, Luan. So what would the responsibility for line managers be in this?
I think the key thing is that line managers understand what the options are and how they work and how they should be managed, and that communication process to be able for the line manager to be able to coach an employee through it, to create the understanding, to ensure that the employee understands what is offered and why those decisions have been made, so that the perception of fairness and equality is there. That is very important for a line manager. Without that, often we say, well, it's HR's role, or often there's the perception that it's HR's responsibility to manage people. HR provides the enabling factors so that aspects such as workforce of one can happen, but it's the line manager's responsibility to make sure that the employee understands how it works, what is available to them, to provide the coaching on the job when it's needed.
Well, Anne mentioned fairness and equality, and I should imagine this could create some animosity within an organisation, particularly if all employees aren't being treated equally.
I think we need to be more fair and help people understand give them choices that they value. For example, giving someone an extra 10% pay rise might be equivalent to actually giving someone free childcare, which allows them to work the hours that the company is looking for them to work. They are valued completely different by different individuals. So I think giving people choices actually creates fairness rather than takes it away.
Conrad, how do you see this fitting in with traditional talent management within an organisation?
Well, I think firstly, a number of organisations haven't got talent management yet. So that's what the baseline that we were referring to earlier, that you first got to set up. I think for organisations that's quite sophisticated with talent management programs, it would certainly assist them to then be able to provide options to individuals and managed options rather than random options between the different individuals. And I think if you look at it from that point of view, it will actually make it easier for the organisation, because you would have sets of options instead of each line manager making his own decision, and therefore you have a wide variety of random options. So there's actually, even though we're talking about a workforce of one, and this is my interpretation, is to some extent you're also talking about standardising the options that you've got. But I think an interesting question that to debate would be, how do you fit this into a unionised environment? Because in that environment you effectively are expected to treat people all the same.
I'm afraid that's a debate we're going to have another day, because we're out of time today, but we'll definitely look at that another time. Thanks very much for coming in tonight. That's all we have time for in this edition of Africa's Boardroom. Thanks again to today's guests. That's Luan Libba from Accenture South Africa, Garen Marcroft from Accenture UK, and Conrad Steyn from Barnstone. Until next month, from me, Stephen Gagnon, it's goodbye.